My girlfriend Hannah and I both grew up in a big town with around 20,000 people. Although we attended the same high school, we didn't meet until a few years ago. After college, I got a job that required a lot of travel in the state. I asked to work at my hometown's branch to do business there and in my hometown. They agreed because there was no business representative there. After a few months, I settled into a routine: 1 to 2 weeks at the city office, 1 week in my hometown, and 1 to 2 weeks traveling around the country. After a year, I decided to buy a house in my hometown. I met Hannah at a Friday night party. I had just returned from a trip and was checking paperwork at my office when Craig, the managing director and colleague, walked in. Craig and I grew up together, but we attended different high schools. Still, we became close friends. He asked about things and invited me to a house party with his buddies that evening. It was short notice, but I said yes for some drinks with friends. At the party, Craig introduced me to Hannah, a new hire at the branch where my hometown's office was. We hit it off immediately. Everything went well. Hannah got along with my parents, and her parents were happy she found someone who made her happy after dealing with relationship issues and depression. After 2 years of dating, she moved into my house in my hometown. Everything was good for nearly a year, then things changed. FaceTime sessions were cut short, or she was too busy to answer the phone. Neighbors told me about a car similar to Craig's, a black Chevy Camaro, seen near my house when I was away. Clothes that weren't mine were found in my wardrobe. Signs pointed to her cheating, but she denied it, saying I was overthinking. She claimed Craig occasionally came over for business discussions, but never stayed the night. I brushed it aside, thinking I was paranoid, and carried on as if nothing was wrong, but there was a nagging feeling that something wasn't right. I discovered she had been lying to me. Nearly 6 months later, I completed a large contract early, decided to book an earlier flight home, and surprise everyone. Driving into my hometown, I noticed Craig's car blocking the back entrance gate. Confused, I approached the house and saw Hannah and Craig having bed life in the kitchen. Shocked and dejected, I left without them noticing. I drove in my car for what felt like a really long time. I was crying a lot, but soon the sadness turned into anger. I really wanted to hurt them badly, but I'm not a person who believes in violence. That's when I decided I was going to make them suffer and ruin their lives. And what better time to start than now? I drove back up the alley, keeping a distance from my driveway to see Craig's car. Then I walked back to the gate, where I could see into the house, and called her phone. When it rang, both of them looked shocked as my name showed up on the caller ID. I saw that she was thinking about answering, but they let it ring for a bit before going back to what they were doing. It rang again. This time she picked up the phone. As she was answering, I hung up and went back to my car. As soon as I did, she called me back and asked why I was calling so late. I said I was about 15 minutes from home and didn't want to scare her when I was coming in. She was surprised, but acted happy that I was coming. The call ended quickly after she said she was going to get up and get changed. I said bye and hung up. A few moments later, Craig rushed through the gate half undressed, jumped into his car, and sped off. I laughed a little, knowing they were close to getting caught. I waited a bit before turning my car into the same place Craig had been moments earlier. The night was quiet after that, and it wasn't until she fell asleep that I went to my office. I couldn't sleep. I needed a plan, and plan revenge I did. My mother always taught me to be a pacifist and let karma take its course. But this time, I decided karma needed some help. I planned to punish them separately, but ruin them both. I knew Craig had a Medicaid weakness, though not major, and kept it private. I found out accidentally when I saw some powder in his office, but pretended not to notice. I did him a favor because our office had a strict no-substance mistreat policy. Weeks later, with friends over, including Craig, for drinks, I made sure he was pretty drunk. I told him to stay the night. I took his office keys and went to our branch office. Knowing he'd be asleep until morning, I searched his desk and found a hidden compartment in a drawer. I hit the jackpot with all sorts of stuff inside. I took photos, put everything back, and installed a tiny spy camera above the door. Craig must be using medications at least twice a day, judging by what I found. I had suggested installing CCTV cameras at home for security, but Hannah was hesitant. Before leaving for a flight, I staged a break-in by smashing my back door and leaving it open. I got messages about it when I arrived. My mom was panicking, Hannah was upset, and the police asked me to call. After returning calls, I told the police I was away on business and would talk to them next week. While away, I had Hannah stay with my parents and got my dad to arrange for security cameras and an alarm system. After returning, I acted surprised about the break-in and had the security company explain everything to us. Then came the question I had been waiting for. What if we conduct some business and I don't want a record of it? When she posed this question, she acted shy, but I understood exactly why she was asking. He reassured us that this was a common question, and on the home computer, he demonstrated how to prevent certain cameras from recording if we wanted to maintain privacy, especially to protect her modesty. As I walked him out, I inquired if turning off the cameras could trigger a notification as a security precaution. He came back in, guided me through setting up email notifications, and left shortly after. Additionally, after Hannah finished grocery shopping, I strategically placed spy button cameras throughout the house. It was fantastic. All I needed to do was wait. At this juncture, I sought assistance from legal advice groups on Reddit regarding the couple's law in my country. I wanted to ensure that my upcoming plan could be legally executed, and I wouldn't be obligated to pay money or equity to Hannah. I wanted to avoid any unpleasant surprises where she might take money from me. Thanks to the Reddit community, I connected with a helpful lawyer who assured me that despite dating for almost 4.5 years, we hadn't lived together long enough to be considered a de facto couple. Also, the fact that I paid all the utilities on the property she lived in without paying rent demonstrated she had no legal standing for a financial claim against me. Just to be sure, he drafted a solid legal document, just in case anything went wrong legally. More good news followed. The next week, my boss offered me a promotion to lead the team in the city, reducing travel. Accepting the offer, I began the process of transferring, which would take about 6 weeks, ample time to gather all my evidence. Upon returning to my hometown the following week, I initiated the remaining steps of my plan. I asked Craig for a favor, requesting approval for 1 week of vacation for Hannah for 2 weeks. I aimed to send her and a friend or two on a short break. He agreed, expressing enthusiasm and congratulating me on being ready to take a significant step in my life for the second time. I hugged him back tightly, although not in the way he might have imagined. He agreed and blocked out the week for me, and I requested him to keep it a surprise, knowing it would spread like wildfire around the office. That was my plan. That evening, I informed Hannah that I had booked an all-expenses-paid trip for her and 2 friends to a tropical spa resort for a week, instructing her to pick 2 friends for the surprise of her life. I then shared that the following week, I would be in the city preparing for a crucial client, and I wouldn't be home until the Monday she was leaving. This seemed to disappoint her a bit, but I assured her it would be worth it when she returned. What I failed to disclose was my decision to take a 2-week vacation on the other side of the country, mentally preparing myself for the challenges that would arise the moment she stepped foot on the plane, all while enjoying my first taste of freedom on Sunday. 2 weeks later, I flew back and started driving home. Upon arrival, I quickly passed by my house, and sure enough, Craig's car was there. Similar to the first night I caught them, I parked a bit away and checked the CCTV cameras. They were all live, but I couldn't find them. Switching to the spy cameras and the one hidden in the bedside lamp, I discovered them in my bedroom. Since we hadn't installed any CCTV in our bedroom, she probably felt they were safe on our bed. No surprise, as I had recorded them doing this constantly over the 2 weeks I was away. I then made my first call to the police, blocking my caller ID. I informed them that I was one of my neighbors who saw someone in a car in the alley behind my house, passing things through the windows to passing cars and looking into my yard. I expressed concern about possible medication dealing, providing Craig's car details and description and stating I suspected him to be the medication dealer. They said they'd have someone there in a few minutes, so I thanked them and hung up. After that, using a new email I had just set up, I sent all the videos from the spy cam of Craig doing medications in his office and also the photos from the other night. I forwarded these to his boss after searching through his desk. Next, I called Hannah and let her know I was about 10 minutes from home. Even though I knew she was flying out the next day, I wanted to surprise her. Looking back at the footage now, I chuckled at the commotion I caused, and I'm surprised I didn't hear any sounds. In a few seconds, Craig came out, half-dressed, and hurried to his car through the back door. It was perfect. As Craig sped away, a police car behind me saw him driving fast and gave chase. After arriving, greeting an excited Hannah, and doing all the couple things, she fell asleep again. On the contrary, I couldn't sleep at all. The next day, she and her friends left in a car. Once they were gone, I had to wait a few hours, but then I started executing my plan. I called my friend, a removalist, and apologized for the late notice, but I needed my place packed and moved. On Friday, after agreeing on a time, I told him he would need to take certain boxes to a storage facility, which he said wasn't an issue. Then, I began packing Hannah's belongings. Later that day, the police called for me to identify if I knew Craig and if I suspected him of any suspicious activities or medication use. Our town took a strict stance on medication law enforcement. I expressed pretended shock and replied no. Turns out they had apprehended the suspect from the previous night with a lot of hard and illegal medications in his vehicle. I grinned, happy that my plan for Craig had come to fruition. By this point, the town was buzzing with news. Events in my hometown don't stay secret for long. Craig was disgraced and promptly fired for medication possession. That night, I went to my parents' house and told them and Hannah's parents what had happened, leaving out certain details, and that I was moving back to the city after being promoted, but Hannah wouldn't be a part of it. They were initially upset that I hadn't kept them informed, but were glad I was handling everything maturely and hadn't stooped to their level, though they didn't agree with ghosting Hannah. After some drinks, laughs, and tears, I went home on Friday afternoon, after a busy week of organizing cleaners for the following week, contacting the real estate agent to put my house on the rental market, and completing various tasks at my hometown's office. I packed some things into my car, drove to my parents' place, said goodbye, and before leaving, I visited Catherine's house. Catherine had been one of Hannah's closest friends growing up. She was the only other person who knew what was happening. Without her help, I probably wouldn't have been able to organize everything as quickly as I did. I gave Catherine a large manila folder with my gathered evidence of her cheating, along with a letter and a few other legal documents from my attorney stating that she was ordered not to contact me and the details of how to access her belongings located at the storage unit I had rented out. After a quick goodbye, I left and drove back to the city. On Sunday, I woke up to several missed calls, voicemails, and text messages. Turns out, Hannah had come home early after being alerted to something being afoot in town, only to find an empty house and a for rent sign out front. Panicking, she went to my parents, who closed the door on her the moment they answered, forcing her to call everyone until she managed to somehow be contacted by Catherine and told that she had a package for her. I heard she didn't handle it well, and I knew this for sure because I got lots of angry texts and voicemails accusing me of framing Craig and being deceitful. I was worried she might come to my front door, but nothing happened. Now, 6 weeks after leaving and getting promoted, I'm content and settled. Second story. I'm a 37-year-old guy, and my wife is 31. A few years back, everything seemed fine, and I thought we were a happy, typical suburban couple. Despite being together for a long time, our marriage was solid. We had an open relationship without any major problems, financially stable, a good bed life, and we genuinely loved and respected each other. We have 2 kids, a 16-year-old girl, and a 9-year-old. I believed we had a decent social life, but we hit a rough patch that many married couples go through. Both of us were working long hours, not spending enough time together, which affected our relationship. Also, she started spending more time on her phone, texting her girlfriends. I didn't think much of it until she became overly protective of her phone and started acting distant towards the kids and me. These were warning signs that bothered me. So, I tried harder to be emotionally present, help with household chores, and spend quality time with her. Despite my efforts, the emotional gap between us widened over a few weeks, and she seemed more distant. I discovered the affair on our son's 8th birthday, a night with family, friends, and colleagues. While taking a photo of her, my son, friends, and her parents, a text message appeared on her phone saying, "I love you very much, baby. I miss you." My mind raced as I smiled for the photo. The number wasn't saved, and I realized the affair had been ongoing for a long time. Later that night, I checked her messages, but couldn't find details. Frustrated, I swore to get to the bottom of it. Days later, I came home early to spend time with the kids. While charging their emergency phone, I discovered her Facebook Messenger was still logged in. I found explicit messages and undressed photos between my wife and a guy named Lewis. The messages revealed she didn't love me anymore, criticized our closeness, and planned to leave me for him. It was painful, spanning 2 years. Overwhelmed, I took screenshots and decided to confront her when she returned. A message came in from Craphead, asking if they were still down for the weekend. She replied, "Yeah, honey," the next day. Craphead went on to remind her of the name of the hotel and room number he'd be staying at. Such an idiot. It was music to my ears. I decided to confront her there and humiliate them both. I knew where they would be and what room they'd be staying in. All I needed to do was stage the perfect surprise. I was worried about my kids and the new life that was about to come. She came home from the supermarket. I could hardly look her in the eye, and I didn't want to give myself away, so I went out. I consulted a lawyer, got my options, had a few drinks, and started laying out my plan, sure as hell. The next day, the wife is buttering me up. She says she wants to take a spa weekend with the girls to relax, and when she returns, she wants us to go on vacation, reconnect with ourselves, and focus on our marriage. I go with it all the way. I tell her for sure, of course. It's the most incredible idea she's ever had, and I'll do anything to get us back on track. I talked to my lawyer and asked him to create a strong agreement for our separation, specifying when she should move out, the visitation schedule for weekends, and no child support until the divorce is final. She had no idea this was coming. She got ready, left, and kissed me goodbye, saying she loves me. I told her to have fun, and she left immediately. I went to the bank, closed our joint and money market accounts, and got a cashier's check for her share. I deposited my half into my new account and then went back home. In my office, I printed about 35 pages of Facebook screenshots, killing time because I wanted her and her new partner to get comfortable before I arrived. I also called her parents, inviting them to a surprise. They were worried at first and wanted to know what the surprise was, but I calmed them down and convinced them to come. I managed to contact Lewis's wife through Facebook, and she wasn't that hard to find. I tried calling, but there was no answer. So I drove to her address and explained what was going on. She initially broke down, but agreed to come. We reached the hotel around 12:30, finding her parents already there. We went straight up to their room. Her parents were confused, asking where my wife was and who Lewis's wife was. I calmed them down, and we went to the room. I knocked, claiming to be the hotel manager, and asked to speak with Lewis. He came out in just a towel. I can't forget the look on his face. He went white, tried to talk, but his wife struck him and walked off. He went after her. Then my wife called from inside. I went in with her parents to find my wife in just a towel. She turned white, started to cry, and her mother joined in. I guess she's supposed to be her parents' golden child. She started saying things, claiming it's not what it seems, etc. I told her I'm not here to argue. I handed her the divorce papers and the printed out texts, saying I would email them to everyone we knew and give them to our daughter so she would see the truth about her mother. She broke down, worried about her professional and parental image. I gave her a check for half of the money market account and told her I withdrew my half from all the other joint accounts. It was enough for her to find a place. She started crying more. Her parents were silent and in tears. They went to stand in the lobby. I could almost see the different thoughts and waves of emotions going through her. She asked why I would do this to her, but we both knew she brought it on herself. I told her I expect her to sign the papers and leave them at the house when she comes to get her stuff. I started to leave. I told her she could continue to have fun with Lewis. I left and apologized to her parents. I'm really sorry they had to see this. They understood and advised that we both see a marriage counselor before any decision is made. But my mind is made up. On my way out, I passed Lewis and his wife having a fit downstairs. I smiled a little. Serves the monster right. We exchanged a few heated words. He asked if I'm happy, and I screamed yes. I got in my car. I started to cry, but I managed to pull myself together enough to drive off. I have no idea what she did that evening or over the weekend, but she repeatedly texted and called me asking to talk. I turned off the phone. She came on Monday to talk to the kids, basically saying Mommy and Daddy need some time apart, We still love you, etc. She then apologized some more and said she wanted her family back, but she didn't know what she was doing, etc. I have no intention of ever taking her back. She betrayed me. I also got a call later from Mrs. Lewis. She thanked me for coming to her, etc. And we're very good friends now. She also filed for divorce. I like her. We went to court, and I think the judge felt sorry for me. He asked for statements from the kids and who they wanted to stay with. They both chose to stay with Dad in the house they grew up in. My ex cried when the divorce was finalized. I got the house and had to buy out some of her equity, which wasn't much of a problem. I also got primary custody of the kids. The kids are happy and doing fine. She still calls saying we should get back together, but that is never going to happen. Update. I'm doing well and settled in nicely with the kids. The vibe around the house has been strange lately. The living room, where we used to spend most of our family time, feels like a deserted island now, and even the kids avoid it. I intentionally work late to avoid thinking too much about everything. Though I've been ignoring her, I started implementing some advice I read, the 180, and have been civil, if a bit distant, towards her. I'm glad I made this change because I was starting to feel like a monster for completely ignoring her. It wasn't the right way to behave, and I ended up feeling like I was the one who wronged her. The only time I deviated from the 180 was when I found her crying in the bathroom last weekend. She was there to see the kids, and I helped her up and gave her a hug, though it was more of a comforting gesture than a loving one. Sadly, now I'm suspicious of her motives, thinking she might be waiting for me to come in to put on a performance. I'm completely over my ex, though. She comes to see the kids occasionally, talking about saving the marriage and proving it was just a silly mistake. She looks terrible, lost her job, and her boss fired her after learning about our divorce. I heard she and Lewis decided to stick together for a while, but it doesn't bother me. Anyway, I meant what I said in my original post. Any love I had for her disappeared after reading the hurtful things she said. She's no longer my true love. I see her as trash that needs to be taken out before it stinks up the place. She suggested a compromise in a few months and pushed for couples counseling, but I'm not interested. The thought of spending Christmas with her makes me feel ill. Her friends now share everything with me, and they're on my side. It went badly for Lewis. He had a tough time in his divorce, lost his child, and faced consequences at work. He confronted me, blaming me for his situation, but I laughed it off. He lost his job after his ex-wife exposed everything to his bosses, and I got a restraining order against him. My wife and Louis live together, and I heard he doesn't treat her well, blaming her for everything. She looks pale, has no friends, and sometimes I feel sorry for her. I let her stay overnight sometimes, but I'm always careful. I've been seeing other people, and currently, I'm going out with a very nice lady I met at my party. Friends threw the party to cheer me up after the divorce, and she's the breath of fresh air I needed. We've been going out for 2 months, and she's great with the kids, but I won't reveal her name. I invited her to move in with me. My ex isn't happy and still dreams of us being a family. She keeps begging me to take her back, but like I said, it's not happening. She believes she can win me back no matter what. A few weeks later, I get a call from the lawyer's office. The attorney tells me that my wife is trying to reopen the case, claiming she's pregnant with my child. I'm confused because it's not possible. We haven't been close even before the divorce. She's lying, and the child isn't mine. I share this with my friends, and they reassure me, saying it's just a desperate attempt to reconcile. How would getting pregnant help? It's obviously for Lewis, the guy she's staying with. The lawyer advises me not to worry, assuring me she'll need a paternity test to prove I'm the father. I'm genuinely concerned for her mental health. She should see a psychologist. The next day, she tells my girlfriend she's pregnant with my child and claims to be the mother of my kids. I kick her out, telling her that if she wants to see the kids, they'll visit her place, and she shouldn't come back. She protests, but I stand firm. She refuses a paternity test, but tells everyone the child is mine, claiming I did all this to get rid of her and bring in a new wife. After a few weeks, Louis's wife contacts me and says they're getting back together. She mentions that he's suffered enough and will be moving in with her soon. I inform her about my ex and their supposed baby, and she says they'll figure it out. Louis doesn't hesitate. He leaves my ex and returns home, leaving her alone and pregnant. I feel sorry for her troubles, but she brought it upon herself. I'm considering marrying my new girlfriend, moving away from this house, and starting a new life.
I've always loved the quiet of the early morning. Being a morning person, I savor my coffee and dive into newspaper puzzles. Since childhood, problem solving has captivated me, so it's no shock that I ended up in a career breaking complex codes and fighting computer threats. The work is hard, but nothing compares to the thrill of solving a puzzle others can't crack. In my job, certainty is rare. One moment I'm enjoying a Sudoku, the next I'm thrown into a crisis. My team is used to sudden calls and changes. It's part of national security work. Still, some events can completely upend your life. On December 26th, I was sipping coffee and working on a Sudoku when my phone rang. I always solve one puzzle in the morning to wake up my brain. In many ways, puzzles are more than a hobby. They're my job. My team analyzes suspicious computer codes, traces their origins, and counters potential threats. It's perfect for a problem solver like me. The caller ID showed my boss's number. I sighed. A call during Christmas break was the last thing I wanted. But when the boss calls, you answer. "I need you in the office now, Thomas," he said, skipping pleasantries. "Seriously? It's the day after Christmas," I protested. "It's national security. Get moving." I scribbled a note for my wife, Ginny, grabbed my coat, and drove to NSA headquarters, wondering what could be so urgent. Recently, I had been working on a strange piece of code, a worm that seemed harmless. It didn't respond to our usual tests, making it even more intriguing. Maybe this emergency was related to that. When I arrived, I was directed to my boss's office, which was unusual. He was talking quietly with the director. Something was off. My boss turned to me and said, "Thomas, I have difficult news. Your wife is having an affair." I was stunned. "No, that's not true," I shouted. The director added, "We have a recording." He played it, and Ginny's voice filled the room, unmistakably talking to another man. My world collapsed. "Turn it off," I yelled, unable to bear it. Hearing my wife speak like that was devastating. Listening to it in front of my boss made it even worse. My boss looked concerned as he asked, "Are you okay, Thomas?" "No," I whispered, trying to process everything. Then anger surged through me. "Were you tapping my wife's calls? You had no right." The director responded calmly. "It's not that simple. We weren't surveilling Ginny. The system flagged her partner's voice. He's on our terror watch list." I stared in disbelief. "Ginny isn't a terrorist?" "We don't believe she's involved," the director explained. "We think he targeted her." Relief mixed with confusion. I struggled to understand. Why did she fall for him? I pushed aside my emotions to focus. Why would a terror group target Ginny? "They want to get to you, Thomas," my boss said quietly. "Me? Why?" I asked, shocked. "We suspect they're after NSA information. You're the link." I slumped into a chair, feeling lost. The director leaned forward, his voice serious. "Can you face Ginny tonight and pretend none of this happened?" "Not a chance," I replied, resolute. He nodded. "We're sending you out of town until we figure out what's going on." Frustration boiled up again. "Why not arrest him?" I demanded. "Emir has disappeared," the director said grimly. "His phone is off, and he's not at his apartment." My anger shifted to concern. Is Ginny in danger? "We don't think so," he assured me. "She was just a means to an end." Reluctantly, I headed home, packed a bag, and left a note for Ginny. I slipped my wedding ring into my pocket. The bond shattered when I heard that recording. On the flight, I tried to distract myself with a Sudoku puzzle, but couldn't focus. I kept touching the ring in my pocket, wishing I could go back to before this mess. At Nashville Airport, an FBI agent named Henry picked me up for the drive to Oak Ridge. The 150-mile drive was mostly silent. We passed a power plant, and he pointed out its importance to NSA operations. When we arrived at Oak Ridge National Lab, I toured the facilities and proposed using their computing power to identify malware authors by coding style, similar to how linguists analyze text. The head techie got excited about the idea, and I felt a spark of hope amidst the chaos. That evening, Henry took me to a local restaurant. Back at the motel, I found a voicemail from Ginny, irritated by my sudden trip. Her voice sounded normal, but all I could hear was her tone from the recording. Memories of our life together flooded my mind. I recalled how Ginny once furiously condemned a friend's cheating husband, which had reassured me she'd never cheat. What a fool I was, I muttered. What a hypocrite she is. The next day, I toured another part of the Oak Ridge complex. The visit felt pointless, but I understood they wanted me out of the way for now. By noon, I asked Henry if we could leave, and to my surprise, he agreed. We headed to a local diner for lunch. Over lunch, I asked if there was anything interesting nearby. Sure, Henry said. There's some beautiful country if you're willing to get off the main roads. Anything was better than more wandering, so I agreed. We headed northwest to Frozen Head State Park. Curious about the name, I asked Henry, and he explained it came from the park's main peak, often snow-covered in winter. The highway turned into winding roads as we entered the park near Petros. As we climbed the mountain, the views were stunning, with clear vistas due to the lack of foliage. Henry pointed out every overlook, but he was so distracted that he didn't notice an approaching SUV until it slammed into us. Son of a... Henry yelled, trying to steer clear. The SUV hit us again, forcing us off the road. Henry struggled to regain control, but the car flipped and rolled. When we finally stopped, we were upside down. I hung by my seatbelt, watching the SUV back up and turn around. He's coming back, I shouted. Henry reached for his weapon. Just as the SUV sped toward us, a second car appeared, heading straight for it. The SUV swerved at the last second, lost control, and rolled down the ravine. There was a crash as it hit rocks and trees. The second car screeched to a halt, and a woman jumped out, running toward us. She wore jeans, a leather jacket, and had short, slicked-back hair, holding a combat knife. Now she's coming for us, I thought, struggling with my seatbelt. She reached Henry first, cut him loose, and then moved to me. Grab onto something, she ordered. I did, but still landed awkwardly when she cut me free. She started to pull me out, but stopped suddenly. I saw Henry running down toward the wrecked SUV. No, come back, she yelled. Get away from there. Then, a voice from the ravine shouted something like, Los Angeles, followed by a deafening explosion. The blast knocked the woman to the ground. I rushed over to help her up. What was that? I asked. They call it a martyr's vest, she said grimly. They're using them now. I remembered Henry. Henry! I shouted and started toward the ravine, but she grabbed my arm. Unless you have combat experience, you don't want to see that. He's gone, she said, pulling me back. What about Henry? I asked. I need to report this. We need to leave now, she snapped. There might be a second team. Who sent them? I asked, buckling my seatbelt. It doesn't matter. They want you dead, and my job is to stop that. I glanced back, noticing something red on the windshield. She turned on the wipers, clearing it. That was Henry, I realized, feeling sick. It hit me that she and Henry had been working together. I'm sorry about your partner. What partner? She replied, confused. I'm not with the FBI. Now I was really lost. Then who are you with? Mossad, she answered, eyes on the road. The Israeli intelligence agency? What does Mossad want with me? Right now we're trying to keep you alive, she said, steering onto the interstate. I appreciate you saving my life, but I don't even know your name. She glanced over with a hint of a smile. Esther Freeman. Nice to meet you, Thomas Selfridge. As we drove east, confusion and questions filled my mind. Why are terrorists after me? And why is Mossad involved? She shot me a look. Why do you think they were waiting for you? I have no idea, I admitted. I was ordered here, but I don't know why they want me dead. You don't have to play coy. I know why your boss sent you here. You know about Ginny and Ymir? I asked, stunned. She nodded. We've been aware of their affair for a while. I've heard the recordings. It's bad enough she cheated, but now everyone knows, I muttered. That's not why you were ambushed, she continued. They used you as bait to lure Ymir away from Fort Meade. They didn't know his plan and wanted him far from the NSA. They hoped Henry could handle it, but he got careless. They used me as bait? I fumed. Then I noticed we passed the Oak Ridge exit. Aren't we supposed to turn off there? I asked. Not anymore. We're heading back to Fort Meade, she said. We're driving all the way to Washington? I asked in disbelief. She simply nodded. As we cleared Knoxville's traffic, I couldn't hold back my questions. Why has Mossad been following me? And why is Ymir after me? Was that Ymir who blew himself up with Henry? No, she replied. That was his brother Hassan. But Ymir is the one we're after. We need him alive. So who is Ymir, and why is he targeting me? I pressed. She hesitated. That might be partly our fault. The computer virus you've been analyzing, we sent it to the NSA. How do you know about that? I asked. We intercepted it in Tel Aviv. We believe it's aimed at Israel. It's called Al-Andalus. What's Al-Andalus? I asked. It's from history. Some groups want to reclaim land from the Middle Ages. This virus is their first step. They targeted you because you're the one who could crack it. I sat back, trying to process everything. I was about to ask more when she suddenly took an exit toward Johnson City. "Where are we going?" I asked. She turned off the engine and rested her head on the seat. "I can't go any farther," she said, then passed out. I panicked, rushing around to the driver's side. That's when I noticed a tear in her jacket's shoulder, soaked with blood. I helped her to the back seat and drove to a nearby motel. I paid cash for a room and returned to find her sitting up. She nodded at the room key, making me feel a bit better. Once inside, I carefully removed her jacket, revealing a deep wound. "I need you to find a pharmacy," she instructed. I grabbed the car keys and bought the supplies. When I returned, she was ready for me to clean the wound. She didn't make a sound as I worked. "Hand me my knife," she said next. "You want me to stitch this?" I asked, horrified. "If you don't, I could go into shock." "I'll guide you," she replied firmly. I threaded the needle, trying to ignore my fear. She bit down on the knife handle as I stitched her up, gasping occasionally. I finished as quickly as I could. "Not bad for a first-timer," she muttered before fainting. Panicked, I checked her breathing and propped her up. She came to after a few minutes. "I just need to sleep," she whispered, drifting off. Exhausted, I collapsed onto the bed beside her and fell asleep instantly. December 29th. Morning light filled the room as I woke up, embarrassed to find my arm around Esther's waist. Carefully, I pulled away, not wanting to wake her or give the wrong impression. Slipping on my shoes, I grabbed my wallet and keys and went out to find some breakfast. Luckily, there was a fast food spot near last night's pharmacy. I picked up breakfast sandwiches and coffee. When I returned, Esther was awake and asked me to change her bandage. The bleeding had stopped and there was no sign of infection. I helped her put on her sweater, making sure to be gentle and respectful. We both quickly devoured the food, sipping our coffee in silence. Then she gave me a curious look. "I didn't know Ginny had a tattoo," she said. "She doesn't," I replied. "Why do you ask?" "When I got up last night, I saw your wallet open to her picture. Looked like a tattoo on her neck." My mood darkened. "That's an old photo," I said flatly. "It's not a tattoo, it's a port wine stain." Her eyebrow raised. "Tell me more." "Ginny and I went to high school together. She was beautiful but self-conscious about the birthmark on her neck. Kids teased her relentlessly. One day, I stepped in to defend her. That's when our relationship started. We went to college together and eventually got married, but Ginny never believed she was truly beautiful. She always tried to cover that birthmark. A year ago, she decided to have laser treatments to remove it. After months of treatments, it was gone and her confidence soared. She began dressing more provocatively, drawing attention from other men. I wasn't happy, but she loved the admiration. When I voiced my concerns, she accused me of holding her back, so I stayed quiet. We can see how well that turned out. Esther studied me silently. I braced for her to criticize me for letting things spiral out of control. Instead, she simply said, "You're an interesting man, Thomas." Not what I expected. She stood up abruptly. "Let's hit the road. We've got a long drive ahead." Since her arm was still healing, I took the wheel. We crossed into Virginia quickly, but had another 8 hours of driving to go. As we traveled north on I-81, I asked, "So what's the story with the Al-Andalus virus? Why is it such a big deal?" She turned serious. "Our team has been working on it since we found it. Initially, we thought it was a data theft tool, but it doesn't do anything. It just runs briefly, then shuts down." "So what's the concern?" "3 reasons," she replied. "First, it's highly sophisticated. No one would put in this much effort for something trivial. Second, we've intercepted chatter among terror groups hinting at a major event. And third, you." "Me?" I was taken aback. "Yes. When we sent the virus to you, the noise level spiked and then went silent. Then 2 dangerous individuals came after you." "Emir and his brother," I muttered. "Exactly. Whatever Al-Andalus is, it's critical to their plan. We need to crack it." "So when we get back to DC, we head straight to Fort Meade?" I asked. "No, they might not let us in after what happened at Oak Ridge. It's safer if you work from home. You have secure NSA access, right?" I nodded. "Yes." "Then that's the plan." The idea of working from home was unappealing. I dreaded the thought of facing Ginny. It would only distract me from focusing on the virus. Despite trying to drive quickly, we were delayed by pit stops, lunch breaks, and Esther's worsening pain. I eventually pulled into Harrisonburg to find a pharmacy. The pharmacist, noticing Esther's condition, handed me a single Lortab tablet. "It should help until you get to a doctor," she said. Back in the car, Esther waited to take the pill until we stopped for dinner at a small burger joint in Front Royale. The medication made her drowsy, and it was clear we wouldn't make it back that night. I found a nearby Super 8 motel and helped her inside. She fell asleep minutes later. Alone in the dark room, the events of the past few days replayed in my mind. My life had been turned upside down, and Ginny's betrayal left me reeling. The anger bubbled up, and before I could think it through, I went outside and called her. She didn't pick up, so I left a voicemail. "It's me, Ginny," I began, barely controlling my anger. "I know about your affair with Ymir. I heard what you said about him while you're with me. It made me sick. I can't believe you betrayed me after everything I've done for you, after all your talk about loyalty." I paused, taking a deep breath. "I'll be home tomorrow, and I don't want you there. Go to your boyfriend's, your parents, anywhere but here. The only time I want to see you again is in divorce court." I hung up, wishing I could slam an old-fashioned phone down to release some of my rage. I wandered the streets to cool off, then returned to the room. Esther was still asleep. I lay down beside her, reminded that I'd likely be sleeping alone for a long time. With that sad thought, I drifted off. December 30th. The motel breakfast was simple, but enough to get us going. Esther said her arm felt better, but I still drove. It took about an hour and a half to reach D.C., then we navigated through the Beltway. When we arrived in College Park, I noticed Ginny's car was gone. Looked like she had listened to my message. I circled the block and parked. The house was a mess, but I ignored it. I led Esther to the home office and booted up my computer. Just as I was about to log into the NSA network, I heard the front door key turn. "Damn it," I muttered, getting up. I told her not to come here. I opened the door to find Ginny, tears streaming down her face. "I'm so sorry, Thomas," she cried. Before I could react, she was pushed into my arms and a man stepped out, holding a weapon. "What the?" I shouted, freezing at the sight of the weapon. Esther rushed forward, but stopped when he aimed at her. "Back off," he ordered, slamming the door shut with a smug grin. "Allow me to introduce myself. I am Ymir," he sneered at me. "You must be the pathetic, betrayed man." He turned to Esther. "And the infamous Mossad agent, Esther Freeman." Esther tensed, ready to strike, but Ymir shifted the weapon to her. "Don't try it. One wrong move and we all go up," he said, revealing a vest of explosives under his jacket. "So, nerd boy," Ymir taunted, turning to my computer. "The password. Give it to me." "No," I replied, hoping to buy us some time. He laughed. "Let's see if I can change your mind. Maybe I'll start with her," he said, motioning toward Esther. Then he turned the weapon toward Ginny. "Or maybe I'll just mutilate her." Ginny screamed. Ymir's eyes locked on me. "Would you care if I liquidated her?" Damn it, I thought. Despite my anger at her, I couldn't let this happen. "Fine, don't hurt her. I'll give you the password." "Much better," he said, moving to the computer. "What is it?" I hesitated, my mind racing. I needed control of his hands. A risky idea came to me. If it failed, he'd likely eliminate me, but he might eliminate me anyway if he found out I hadn't cracked the virus. "It's not memorized," I lied. "I used the product code from that metal cube on the shelf," he sneered. "You really are a nerd." He picked up the small, flat silver cube. "That's only half," I added quickly. "The other half is on the second cube over there." I pointed to a wooden cabinet. Suspicious, he aimed the weapon at my chest. "Pick it up and show it, slowly." I grabbed the identical metal cube. "Want me to bring it to you?" "No," he snapped. "Put it on the floor and slide it over with your foot." Ginny was still crying, and Esther watched me intently. I knelt, placed the cube on the floor, and pushed it toward him with my shoe. "Back up, all of you," Ymir ordered. We moved against the wall. Ymir set his weapon down, kneeling to pick up the second cube, holding one in each hand. Suddenly, his hands slammed together with a loud crack. He screamed, dropping to his knees, trying to pull his hands apart. I charged, knocking him down. Esther was right behind me, kneeing him in the head twice. Ymir slumped, unconscious. "Got any tape?" she yelled. I grabbed duct tape, and we quickly bound his arms together, his fingers pinned between the metal cubes. Esther taped his legs and turned to me, confused. "What are those cubes?" she demanded. "Neodymium magnets," I admitted, blushing. "Super strong, with about 140 pounds of force. I bought them out of curiosity, but they scared me. This was the only way to keep him from setting off his vest." "No wonder he couldn't separate his hands," she muttered. Suddenly a loud thud echoed and the front door burst open. Men stormed in with attack rifles. "FBI down, hands in the air!" one shouted. After confirming our identities, the agents removed Emir's vest and disarmed it. This would have blown up the entire house, one agent said. They cut the tape and separated Emir's hands, which took 2 agents. Emir woke, reaching for the vest trigger, only to realize it was gone. He slumped back and glared at us. You think you've won, but it's too late. Al-Andalus, he snarled. Then I heard a crack and smelled bitter almonds. Damn! He took poison! An agent yelled. The medic rushed over. Amyl nitrite now! But Emir convulsed and stopped breathing within minutes. Cyanide! The medic cursed. A fake tooth! With Emir dead, the agents turned to Ginny. Are you Virginia Selfridge? One asked. She nodded, and the agent said, You're under arrest as an accessory to liquidation and terrorism. He read her rights as she gasped and protested. No, I didn't know he was a terrorist, she cried. The agent ignored her, cuffing her. She turned to me, desperate. Thomas, help me! I didn't know! I felt a grim satisfaction. Sorry, Ginny. You did this to yourself. As they led her away, I asked another agent, Are they really charging her? He shrugged. No, she's just guilty of stupidity. We'll interrogate her for any info on Emir's network. Feeling some closure, I approached Esther, who was having her arm checked by a medic. It'll be sore, but it's fine. Though I'd sue whoever stitched you up, the medic said, smirking. Esther smiled and touched my hand. I'll think about it, she replied. Turning serious, she approached the agent in charge. I need an escort to Fort Meade. We need to tackle Al-Andalus now. When we arrived at NSA headquarters, armed guards led us straight to the director's office. Inside, top officials from the NSA, FBI, and CIA gathered. We shared our intel, and they added theirs, concluding that a major attack, codenamed Al-Andalus, was imminent, likely aimed at Israel on New Year's Eve. The meeting devolved into arguments, so Esther and I stepped out for a moment. When we returned, she looked intense. I've been ordered by Mossad to stay with you, she said. Before I could react, the NSA director turned to me. Mr. Selfridge, you've been working on the Al-Andalus virus, and the terrorists targeted you for a reason. I want you to assemble a team to crack this code. You'll have full NSA resources. He nodded at Esther. Mossad wants Miss Freeman on your team. Is that correct, Miss Freeman? She nodded. The director stood up. You two focus on the virus. Time is short. An escort led us to a secure work area, pointing out the computer terminals and phone stations. Look, Esther pointed out. It's 5:30 p.m. here, but it's already New Year's Eve in Israel. If the attack is planned for midnight, time is running out. I sat at a terminal, running different applications to crack the virus, but nothing worked. December 31st. I woke to Esther shaking me. It was 6 a.m. in Washington, 1 p.m. in Tel Aviv. We heard explosions from a TV monitor, fireworks in New Zealand. It's midnight in Auckland, I muttered. Time's running out. The code didn't make sense. We need a different approach, I said. Let's figure out the terrorists' goal. She nodded. Our intel suggests something on the scale of 9/11ths. If I were them, I'd target Israel's Negev nuclear site, I said, dreading the thought. She paled. If they destroyed it, Israel could become another Chernobyl. I stared at the screens showing fireworks in Sydney. Suddenly it hit me. The Patriots, I yelled. The virus targets the Patriot missile system. I rushed to the door. Get someone from the Patriot manufacturer here, now! Minutes later, a man from Raytheon entered. I explained our theory and showed him the virus code. His face grew serious. This code targets the Patriot AN/MPQ-65 radar, altering the intercept data so missiles miss their target. I turned to Esther. Tell the IDF the virus targets the Patriots. She made the call, her expression darkening. The IDF found traces of the virus in one Patriot system. The Raytheon tech added, If one's infected, they all are. They're networked. How do we fix it? I asked. You need to replace the radar units, which takes hours, he replied. That's too long, I said. We need another solution. After hours of effort, an engineer finally said, Your best bet is to destroy the missiles on the ground before launch, then swap out the systems. Esther snapped. We've tried that before and failed. Find another way. As everyone returned to work, Esther pointed to the live feed from Tel Aviv. It's midnight, she whispered. Everyone froze, watching the screens nervously. Esther leaned over. The IDF is on full alert, and I've been told that your military is also at a high state of readiness. The scene in Tel Aviv showed nothing unusual, just typical New Year's Eve celebrations. Esther let out a breath of relief as she reported that Dimona was quiet. The Raytheon team wanted to call it a night, but Esther insisted they keep working. There's too much at stake, she said, and they reluctantly continued. After a while, one of the engineers asked, "Does anyone know what 1.492 signifies?" I shook my head. "Not that I can think of. Why?" "That's the deviation the virus introduces into the targeting data. It's such a precise number. I thought it might mean something." Another tech chimed in. 1492, that's the year, and started singing. In 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. Everyone laughed except Esther, who suddenly looked serious. She hurried to a computer and checked something. "That's it," she yelled. We stared at her, confused, so she explained. Most people know that in 1492, Columbus set sail. But in that same year, the last emir of Granada surrendered to Queen Isabella, ending Al-Andalus. Then her face went pale as she typed furiously. The emir surrendered on January 2nd. The attack was never planned for New Year's Eve. It's set for tomorrow. They want to strike on the anniversary of that defeat. The Raytheon engineers exchanged puzzled looks, but it made sense to me. Esther immediately called Tel Aviv, and I rushed to brief the director. After hearing our theory, he nodded. They never forget old grudges. A coup on that anniversary would be their dream. He paused, then said, "Now, your team has to find a way to stop it." When I returned to the workroom, the Raytheon team had linked to a test version of the Patriot guidance system in Andover. For hours, we tried to root out the virus, but the system wasn't built to handle an internal threat. "It's like an epidemic," one tech groaned. "It's everywhere." January 1st, New Year's Day in Israel passed quietly, confirming Esther's prediction, but it only meant we were that much closer to the real attack. The head of the Raytheon team finally approached me. "We've narrowed it down to two options. First, shut down the infected units, wipe all software, and reload with a clean version. But it's time-consuming, and there's no guarantee we won't reinfect them." I shook my head, turning to Esther. "That might take too long, and we can't risk taking Damona's defenses offline for that long. What if the attack comes early?" She nodded, looking defeated. "Is there anything else?" I asked the engineers. The lead tech hesitated. "We could try to write an error-checking routine, but the system was never designed for this. We don't have a way to stop this virus." Suddenly, a thought struck me. "Smallpox," I blurted out. He looked puzzled. "What? You fight smallpox with cowpox?" "Maybe we can't eliminate this virus, but what if we introduce a second virus to counteract it?" They looked at me skeptically. "The virus skews the targeting data by 1.492 degrees. What if we write a new virus to adjust the targeting by minus 1.492 degrees? They could cancel each other out." The engineers debated the idea. Then the head turned to me. "Some of us think it might work, but others worry it could cause a bigger issue. We can't even be sure the system will accept a second infection." "Look, we know the current virus is highly contagious," I argued. "If we create a duplicate with reverse values, it should balance out. What other option do we have?" After more discussion, they grudgingly agreed. They started creating the antivirus, double-checking everything to match the original except for the altered target values. While they worked, Esther grabbed my arm, concern in her eyes. "Are you sure about this? If it fails—" I met her gaze, filled with both determination and doubt. Memories of standing up for what I believed in flashed through my mind. "It's the right move," I said firmly. "I believe in this." She studied me for a moment, then nodded. "I trust you." The next few hours flew by. The team checked and rechecked the antivirus, while others coordinated with technicians in Israel to prepare for the system reinfection and tests. As midnight in Tel Aviv approached, Esther and I sat through endless meetings with skeptics. Finally, we ended up back in the director's office where, after a heated debate, he addressed his counterparts. "Unless someone has a better solution in the next hour," he said, "it's time to act." With no other options, the director turned to us. "You've come this far. See it through." He led us to the roof where a helicopter was waiting. We boarded and headed to the Pentagon. After landing, we were escorted deep into its command center. Inside, high-ranking officials sat around an oval table facing a large screen. Esther and I took seats against the wall. Soon the lights dimmed and the screen lit up with a satellite view of the Middle East. 2 clocks showed the time in Washington and Tel Aviv. "It's almost midnight in Israel," Esther whispered. The screen zoomed in further until it showed the lights of a small desert town labeled Dimona, with a highway running by it. "Too close," said a voice. The view then zoomed out, revealing the coast of the Mediterranean to the northwest and a dark area to the east. "That's the Dead Sea," Esther whispered, pointing. "A little further, please," the voice directed. Soon, the whole of Israel and parts of its neighboring countries were visible. "We're approaching 0 hour," the voice announced. Esther squeezed my hand tightly, reminding me that this wasn't just a simulation. Real lives were at stake. "Watch the north and northeast," she whispered. "That's where the attack will likely come from." "Syria and Iraq?" I asked. She nodded, eyes fixed on the screen. The room was silent as the seconds ticked down to midnight. There was an audible gasp when the clock hit 24:00, but nothing happened at first. Some people murmured quietly. "Told you so," someone muttered. Then Esther's nails dug into my hand. "There!" she exclaimed, pointing at tiny orange-red arrows rising from the desert north of Israel. More arrows soon followed, arcing southward. "Holy crap!" someone blurted out. "There are over 24 of them, likely Scuds," another voice speculated. The arrows moved past Jerusalem, heading toward the marked target, Dimona. It felt like watching a disaster unfold in slow motion. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. Suddenly, bright flashes appeared around Dimona, and new arrows of light shot into the air. Time seemed to slow as the incoming missiles continued their path. I was convinced we had failed. Then, a large yellow explosion bloomed in the sky over Dimona, followed by more fiery bursts that eventually dissipated. Esther threw her arms around me, kissing me. "You did it! You did it!" she cried. As I hugged her, I heard cheers erupt in the room. "Situation report from Dimona," a voice called out. "One missile got through," someone reported. "It went off course and hit south of the town. Only minor damage." More cheers filled the room. I realized I'd been holding my breath the entire time. Before I could react, a new set of launches appeared on the screen, this time from within Israel. "What's happening?" I asked, confused. Esther was focused on the screen. "Those are Delilah's," she explained. "Ground-launched cruise missiles. Our radar tracked the Scuds, and now we're returning fire." She turned to me, her expression fierce. "Did you think we wouldn't strike back?" As I watched the lights streaking north and east, I realized there were no defenses to stop them. I looked away and sat in silence, observing the room's celebrations. Soon, Esther was called for a phone call, and I felt out of place. An MP approached me. "Sir, the NSA director will be here for a while. He's offered the helicopter to take you and Miss Freeman wherever you need to go." Esther returned, and we followed our escort to the helipad. She seemed unusually quiet. When we boarded, she leaned toward the pilot. "Can you take me to Dulles International Airport?" she asked. "What's going on?" I asked. She sighed. "It's an eye for an eye. The counterstrike was just part of the response. I've been called back to Tel Aviv." "Oh," I said, disappointed. "I thought maybe—" She smiled, squeezing my hand. "I would have liked to celebrate, but we don't always get to choose." The helicopter quickly covered the distance to Dulles. Esther turned to me before getting out. "You've surprised me in many ways, Thomas Selfridge. I won't forget you." She kissed me quickly and left before I could say anything. On the way back to College Park, I felt like I was in a daze. Everything from the past week felt surreal, like scenes from a movie. Once home, I had to enter through the side door because the front was covered with plywood. The living room was still in disarray. "Guess it wasn't a dream," I muttered to myself. I found some food in the fridge and returned to the living room. I righted an overturned chair and sat down, feeling a wave of exhaustion. Looking at the clock, I realized it was almost midnight. "Damn," I muttered. My break was over, and I had work tomorrow. I went to the bedroom surrounded by reminders of Ginny, her clothes, photos, and the furniture she had chosen. I couldn't help but wonder if she and Ymir had ever... I couldn't take it. I grabbed a blanket and slept on the couch. January 2nd. The couch was uncomfortable, so I woke up early. I was eager to read what the Washington Post had to say about the attack. I didn't expect my name to be mentioned, but I thought there might be something about the antivirus effort. Surprisingly, there was nothing on the front page. I went through the paper, but there wasn't a word about it. How do you keep something like that secret? I wondered. At work, everything seemed normal. My coworkers had no clue what had happened. "How was your holiday?" they asked. "It was eventful," I replied casually. A few hours later, I was summoned to see Ben's boss. I walked in, expecting praise, but instead was met with a stern look. He held up a document with my signature. "When you joined the NSA, you agreed to keep any information gathered here confidential," he stated coldly. "Under Section 18 of the U.S. Legal Code, disclosing anything about codes or ciphers of the U.S. or foreign governments, or details related to them, can result in a fine or imprisonment for up to 10 years. This includes everything you saw and did yesterday. Understood? Yes, sir. I nodded. Good. Now get back to work. I left his office feeling deflated. I didn't want a medal, but a bit of gratitude would have been nice. It was clear someone had buried the whole affair. I wasn't going to get any recognition for my role. Instead, I felt like I'd just been in the wrong place at the wrong time. The depression returned as I began the unpleasant task of searching for a divorce attorney. Over the next weeks, things didn't get better. I learned of Agent Henry's end of life through a small article in the Knoxville News-Sentinel. He died in a traffic accident at Frozen Head State Park. He deserved more than this, I thought, frustrated at the lack of recognition. A coworker later mentioned that our boss's boss was being promoted, supposedly due to a coup over the holidays. I fumed inside, knowing he had merely used me as bait. I considered going to the NSA director, but got sidetracked by a political uproar over Israel's actions in Syria. As Congress debated, the NSA director resigned, and a new one took over. My attempts to divorce Ginny hit roadblocks. Maryland wasn't a no-fault state, and proving infidelity would involve classified information. There's no simple way out, I thought, feeling more trapped than ever. So I did what I had to do, but it frustrated me to no end that I had to wait so long to be free of her. I was also unhappy about paying Ginny temporary spousal support. After what she had done, it felt incredibly unfair, but my hands were tied. As winter turned into spring, my mood worsened. I felt increasingly isolated at both work and home. My job brought no satisfaction. The one significant achievement I had made was now a secret, something nobody could acknowledge. Management seemed to disapprove of me, and my coworkers started avoiding me. Outside work, it wasn't much better. Most of our friends were couples, used to socializing in pairs. Now, I was the odd man out, and since no one really knew why Ginny and I had split, I think some assumed it was my fault. So I spent a lot of time brooding. It felt like every time I tried to do the right thing, I was punished. I had tried to take care of Ginny. I didn't expect to be worshipped for it, but a little loyalty would have been nice. And when I got caught up in the terror plot, I thought I responded well. I didn't want a medal, but some acknowledgement would have been appreciated. I began to feel used. Ginny had certainly used me, wanting my support while she got her laser treatments. Maybe she had loved me once, but that disappeared fast when her birthmark was gone and she started getting attention from other men. Work was no different. My boss humiliated me with news of Ginny's affair, used me as bait for the terrorists, and then got all the credit. And hadn't Esther used me too? All she really wanted was my help solving the Alan Dulles puzzle. Once she got it, she flew home without so much as a proper goodbye. I knew that wasn't entirely fair. Esther had saved my life and put herself in danger to do so. Still, she wouldn't have done that if she didn't think I could help. I was tired of being used. Tired of a marriage with a cheating wife and a job where I wasn't valued. I felt an urge to get away, to leave everything behind and start over somewhere far away, where no one had any claims on me. For once, I wanted to put myself first. I'd spent too much time doing things for others. Now it was time to do something for me. The old me would have been horrified. Don't do anything rash, I'd have told myself. You have responsibilities. Well, screw that, I muttered. The few times I'd made big, impulsive decisions in my life, they'd worked out just fine, even if no one else would ever know it. Now, I was going to make another big decision that felt right for me. If others didn't like it, too bad. December 31st, the next year. Cheers erupted in the bar as we watched fireworks explode over Auckland Harbor Bridge. I smiled. It looked just like the scene on the NSA screen a year ago. I had a lot to celebrate. I had left everything behind except my computer, a few personal items, and a bag of clothes. I bought a one-way ticket to Auckland, New Zealand. I chose Auckland for 3 reasons. It was as far away as I could get while still speaking English. I didn't know a soul there and had no obligations. And yes, I was blown away by the scenery in the Lord of the Rings movies. Once again, my decision turned out well. The people in New Zealand were incredibly friendly and welcoming, so I didn't feel as lonely as I'd expected. I found a job quickly. I had enough money to tide me over, but I landed a good position almost immediately. The ANZ banking group had experienced a cybersecurity scare just before I arrived, so my expertise in viruses and malware made me a valuable hire. After starting work, I rented a small 2-bedroom flat and began building my new life. Untangling things back in Maryland was challenging. Breaking away from an old life isn't easy, but I managed. I quit my job, transferred my thrift savings plan, paid my bills, and took care of immediate concerns. I gave my lawyer power of attorney to handle the biggest issue, Ginny. I told him she could keep the house in place of alimony and left the rest to him. The problem was that Ginny refused to accept the situation. She dragged out the divorce process, refusing to cooperate. I instructed my attorney not to reveal my whereabouts. She began to maltreat him, which, of course, added to my legal fees. Finally, I realized I had to speak to her directly. I arranged a Skype call, not telling her that I had to wake up before dawn to do it. That certainly didn't help my mood. New Zealand is literally at the end of the internet cables, so connections can be unreliable. But somehow we got a stable link for our call. Seeing her face on the screen was a shock. She still looked as beautiful as when I first fell in love with her. This won't be easy, I thought. The call didn't start well. She demanded to know where I was, and when I refused to tell her, she switched between anger and tears. "Why did you run away?" she sobbed. "Why won't you tell me where you are?" I sighed. "Honestly, Ginny, you broke my heart. I couldn't bear to be around all the reminders of you. I had to get as far away as possible." To my surprise, she smiled. "That means you still have feelings for me. Why not stop this nonsense and come back?" I tried to stay calm. "Ginny, you cheated. You broke our vows. How can I come back after that?" Her face fell, but then she looked determined. "I know, and I feel terrible about it, but I was vulnerable." "Why?" I pressed. "Why were you vulnerable?" She shook her head as if I was clueless. I had just finished my last laser treatment and was adjusting to my new look. He came along and called me beautiful. Of course I responded. That infuriated me. "But I always told you you were beautiful," I said, "since the first day I met you." "Yes, but you said that before I got my birthmark removed." He had never seen me before, so his compliments meant more, she replied cheerfully. I was too stunned to respond, but my expression must have given away my feelings, because her tone changed, and she looked upset. "I don't want to talk about that," she sniffled. "I've been so lonely without you. I cry every day. I know what I did was awful, and I've kicked myself for being so stupid." She paused to wipe her eyes. "But it wasn't my fault. I didn't know Emir was a trained spy. He was just a handsome guy with sweet words. I got swept up. I didn't realize he was only using me to get to you." She continued hurriedly. "I've learned so much from this. I know I'd be a better wife if you'd just come back. We can be happy again. What do you think, honey?" I watched her as she spoke. She looked and sounded the same as always. But something had changed. I no longer loved her. "Ginny," I said, "I've listened to everything you've said. But two things are missing. You've made it clear what you want and how you feel, but you haven't once asked about my feelings." "Well, of course, I care how you feel," she interrupted. "I know you were hurt, and I'll spend every day making it up to you if we get back together." I held up my hand, stopping her. "There's something else. You never once said, 'I love you.'" She gasped. "Of course I love you. That's a given. I've always loved you." "No, Ginny," I said. "Love isn't a given. It's not just words. It's shown through actions, by what you do and don't do. And you don't show love by cheating just because someone feeds you compliments. I'm sorry, Ginny, but this call has only confirmed that we're done. Goodbye." I ended the call, leaving her tear-stained face frozen on the screen. It hurt to lose someone who once meant so much to me. But I knew I'd made the right choice. December 31st, 2 years later. Earlier in the evening, I had been at a party with friends, but it felt right to spend the New Year's countdown at the bar where I'd first celebrated in New Zealand. The patrons had welcomed me back then, and I felt at home as I raised a pint and watched the fireworks over Auckland Harbor. The past 2 years had treated me well. Ginny finally accepted the divorce, and I gave her the house in exchange for ending spousal support. Now I was legally free. My career took off too. After a year at the bank, I built a reputation as a cybersecurity expert and started consulting on my own. Luck struck again when the National Cybersecurity Center in Wellington reached out for my help, giving me credibility and boosting my business. It also pushed through my permanent residency application, making me an official Kiwi. With the income from my consulting work, I bought a home with a view of Auckland Harbor. I was glad I had taken the leap. The bar dimmed for the fireworks, and at first I didn't recognize the woman behind me. Then she spoke. "Happy New Year, Thomas Selfridge." Her accent was one I hadn't heard in years. I turned and hugged her without hesitation. "Happy New Year, Esther." After a moment, we stepped back. She was as fit as I remembered, in a sleeveless black sweater and tight jeans. I noticed a thin scar on her right shoulder, and this time her dark hair was tucked under a baseball cap. When she tilted her head to watch an explosion over the harbor, I saw the black patch covering her right eye. The bar crowd grew louder, so I leaned in and asked, "Want to go somewhere quieter to catch up?" She smiled. "I'd like that." We drove to my house in Herne Bay. When we pulled into the driveway, she whistled softly. "You're doing well, Thomas. I'm glad." I poured us a drink and led her to the deck. We had a view of the harbor and the distant fireworks. Despite the sea breeze, it was warm. Even after 3 years, it still felt odd to celebrate New Year's in summer. After a while, she took off her cap and turned to me. "Aren't you going to ask about my eye?" I noticed a scar running from under the patch, across her eyebrow, and into her olive skin. "What happened?" I asked. She put the cap back on and sat in a deck chair. "It was my fault. I found one of the terror leaders behind Al-Andalus. Unfortunately, I didn't find his hidden knife until it was too late." She grinned. "But he won't be plotting anything else." I could believe she'd take a wound like that and still win. "Couldn't the doctors?" I gestured to the patch. She shook her head. "The damage was too severe, and by the time I got to a hospital, it was 18 hours later. It was too late." Sensing it was time for a change of subject, I asked, "Are you still with Mossad?" Her expression told me I'd made a mistake. "They kicked me out," she said bitterly. "With this face, I could never go undercover again, and my marksmanship is ruined. They offered me a desk job, but I refused." I felt her pain and stayed silent. Then she added, "The last few years have been hard. I had a lover in Tel Aviv, and we talked about a future together. But after my injury, he couldn't even look at me. He wasn't the man I thought he was." Her voice was calm, but I could tell she was still hurting. I pulled up a chair beside her, putting my arm around her shoulder. We sat quietly, gazing at the city and harbor. Finally, I asked the question that had been on my mind. "How did you find me in New Zealand?" She gave a small smile. "I called in a few favors. You did a good job of disappearing." "At the time, I needed to get away from my old life," I admitted. "But I've made a new life here, and now it feels like home." I looked at her. "Why did you track me down?" Her face grew thoughtful. "You surprised me, Thomas. I thought you were just a computer nerd, but you handled things that would break most people. I regretted not getting to know you better." She paused, staring out at the water. "The time we spent together, despite the danger, was better than anything since. I missed it. And I missed you." She turned toward me. "Besides," she said, her voice husky, "we never got to celebrate." Suddenly, she pulled me into a passionate kiss. We stood up, clinging to each other, and I led her inside to my bedroom. It took us 3 attempts to quench the flames. I woke the next morning to the soft light of dawn. Esther was snuggled against me, and I smiled, recalling our night. As I moved, I noticed her eye patch had fallen off. I picked it up just as she woke. "Give it back!" she cried, snatching the patch from my hand. "Don't look at me," she pleaded, turning away and trying to put it back on. Once it was secure, she bent over, sobbing into her hands. I put my arm around her, letting her cry. Feeling her shudder, a surge of emotions swept over me. This woman saved my life, I thought, and now I can save hers. And I realized that this was exactly what I wanted. For both of us. I gently turned her to face me and removed the patch. "No," she whimpered. "I'm so ugly." "You're wrong," I said softly. "You see only the scar. I see a beautiful, strong woman." She looked at me, disbelief slowly turning into hope. Then she threw her arms around me and kissed me. I knew right then that I had made another good choice.
I secretly went to my wife's office to surprise her on our 10-year anniversary, only to greeted by this. Unthinkable. With the rain we have had, we have crazy hours trying to make up time that we missed. So I work 12 hours on the days it's nice, sometimes a little longer. If it's raining when I get up, I don't go in. Some days we get sent home when it starts, too dangerous. I usually hit the gym for an hour or two. Thursday we start at 6 a.m. Mid-morning starts to rain hard. We go home. I go to the gym as usual. I cut the workout short and head downtown to see my wife Megan to give her flowers and make plans for dinner that night if possible. We really haven't seen much of each other this week. I went to bed around 9 p.m. She wasn't home. Called me earlier. She's working late. Not unusual for the past month. I stopped and got some flowers and went into her building about 12:30. Nicole was at the receptionist desk. I told her I got here later than I wanted and asked if she could put the flowers on Megan's desk. She said, "I don't think they went to lunch yet. Why not drop them off yourself?" She buzzed the door to get back to the offices. The place was deserted. I went to her office. The door was closed. I always walk in unless the receptionist tells me she's in a meeting. I walk in and some guy is standing behind her, nuzzling her neck. She's reaching back over his head. She's giggling only as she can, saying, "We gotta get this done."
I am gut punched.
I slammed the flowers down and said, "Happy anniversary," and walked out. I didn't hear what she said. Nicole said goodbye and left. Made it to the elevators and out the building. Then my phone started ringing. I boiled my eyes out all the way home, went into the garage, pulled my camping gear out of the rafters, and took off. I drove about 2 hours to a state park. I had no idea what to do. I just had to run. I hiked a trail we've been on in the past, about a 3-hour hike. I don't drink much, so I had no booze. I just sat there thinking. Looking back, I am glad I was in a rush.
Normally, I bringa 45 cal.
With me camping, we have black bears, which generally scare off, but get aggressive if hungry or cubs are around. The way I was feeling, I might have eaten the barrel that night. My phone was blowing up for Megan, so I had turned it off. I left the park to get reception and turned it on to see my good friend called. I called him back. He said Megan called him to check on me, make sure I didn't do anything stupid. We talked a bit, told him I got to thinking this through, and would catch up on Friday. So while I am thinking about this, I go over our marriage from the beginning to see what I missed. We come from completely opposite backgrounds. My grandfather raised me with my mom. He taught me about life. He had a little saying about everything. He told me marriage would be the hardest job I ever had. He had to work on it every day. God, I miss him. We did not have much. Heard Mom and Grandpa having many discussions about bills. They worked hard, and my brother and I did not miss out on anything we knew of. Megan was born into money. Not overly rich, but very comfortable. Went to a great college, always had great clothes, a new car, etc., and she is beautiful. 11 out of 10 beautiful. I would joke with her if she coughed about the silver spoon getting stuck in her throat. We met and started dating. I was dumbfounded how such a woman would ever be with me. We dated quite a while before she told me about her parents and lifestyle. Our friends called us the model couple because they thought we were so good looking we had to be models. Families were not as kind. Afraid of the differences economically would come into play. Her dad and I started to get along, but her and my mom took some convincing. We graduate and get her first job. We plan on getting married. We work out between us that we would expose each other to our lives that we live. I took her white water rafting. She took me to the symphony. We went ziplining. We went to an art opening, etc. We agreed that we had to experience the other's interests. She was really enthused about the more physical things we did. I kind of like this symphony and such. I own 2 tuxedos now. I look back and do not see any red flags. Her first 2 jobs she quit because the men all tried to get in her pants. She was paraded out in front for photo ops. Invited a conference as when other newbies were not. At dinner at a conference, a partner tried to get her drunk, then tried to force himself into her room that night. She quit. The next job, the same thing. Quit again. This 3rd job has women as some of the partners, and none of that BS is in her workplace. She seems very happy. We seem very happy. So now, Friday, I am home. I called her. Asked where she was. Back at work. I, being in a smart-ass mood, said that the marriage is taking 2nd place for her job. She responded since I would not talk about what she was doing. Fair enough. She will be home in an hour. So I wait. I want to save our marriage. If I am lacking in providing, then I want to fix it. I want to ask why, of course, but I cannot accept an I don't know answer. Here's the update. Wife and I had a marathon talking session on Friday late night. I started by asking that she be honest in all answers and be complete. Do not tell me half-truths that have to be asked several different ways to get a complete answer. She agreed. I started with why. Answer. I don't know. Kind of what it was expected. We went around and around on this. Finally, I said, how many times did you have sex? started to dodge, but when I let out a sigh and shook my head, she said 6 or 7 times. That started things rolling. I kept my cool. How long? Last 3 weeks. Back to why. Could not give an answer. You still love me? Yes. Saying it because we are done trying to save the marriage? No, with some conviction. Do you find me attractive? Yes. Why? Still can't answer. Am I not giving you something you were looking for? Here she hesitated, but quickly recovered. I knew I was onto something. Could not crack the nut though. Finally, about midnight, I was tired. I said, Megan, you are an intelligent woman. I cannot believe you cannot articulate the why I am asking about. She started crying, saying she is trying to answer my questions. I said, okay, enough for tonight. Time for bed. She started to walk toward the door. I asked where she was going. To my parents' house. I told her that this is our house. I'm not asking you to leave. She's up crying at that point. I said, we are not divorced or separated. That may come, but for now we need to be together until we sort this out. We actually slept in the same bed. Not sex in case you were going to ask. I am up almost most of the night. I am reading some of the comments in DM. Had some great comments and back and forth with a few people. One told me that women generally marry up in social status. We were unusual, maybe second thoughts. One suggested that maybe I was right and that I was not fulfilling something for her. But one told me that there was a post a few days ago describing this scenario, but from the women's view, asking what she should do. We could not find it on the subs you looked at. /surviving infidelity /infidelity. So I pulled up Reddit and put in Megan's account and looked at her history. Bingo. She was the one who posted. So this morning, bright and early, we start again. I start out, why? Same answer. We go around getting annoyed. Then I say, did this guy challenge you intellectually? The look on her face was priceless. He read my post. For the masses, she described how she caught the feeling when they first kissed in a make-out session in a hotel. She left. Next morning, after I left for work, she hightailed it over to a hotel to put an end to it. Then had sex. It continued at least up to her posting. I am sure a couple of days later, I discovered them. She also was weighing whether to leave. Then says this is moving way too fast. She needs to separate from the guy. So I present this to her that she thinks I'm a dumb hick.
No.
She was attracted to him because this project they are on is his idea. She feels she is getting passed by and needs to up her game. The stimulation from this led to the attraction and the rest. Now, I don't know. I know she was sincere. Now the floodgates open. We have a great dialogue through the issue. Mid-afternoon, she wants a break. She leaves for her parents. So I'm writing this update and knock on the door. Okay, gotta say I'm really tired now. There stands Megan's mom. I tell her Megan is on the way to their house. She knows she wants to talk to me. She has never been to our house by herself. She has never that I remember talked to me privately. She says she is not here to sway me in any way. She would accept any decision I make. But she wants to tell me her story. She was married once before Megan's dad. I knew that. The man she married was the love of her life. Didn't have much. She met her husband and they caught some feelings. Before they cheated, she told the first husband they were done. Divorced. When she married a new guy, he had some money but was an up-and-coming executive. Couple years go by, not happy, made a mistake. All husband moved on and is married. She gets pregnant. As Megan goes into depression, was actually institutionalized. 2 years later, pregnant with brother. Repeat cycle. Couple years later, sister is born. Repeat. No more kids, she's fixed. Everyone thought it was postpartum depression. I guess it was, but it mirrored her ex also expanding his family. To this day, she knows where he lives, his kids' names, etc. She has never gotten over leaving a love of her life. She sees how I am with Megan. She sees she is my love. She saw it when she quit her first job. How I took care of her. She got up and left, saying nothing else. Alright, next cheating story. My wife has been cheating since our first-year anniversary. Spoil alert. Me and my wife were married in August of 2019. Things weren't easy. We fought a decent amount, but never to the point where I thought we were in danger of losing each other. We both had our struggles along the way. I have been in active recovery for a porn addiction for over 6 years, while while she was starting her therapy journey to address childhood incestuous abuse. I thought we were on the right track. When August 2020 came along, our relationship still had its rough spots, but it was the first year of marriage. It was supposed to be this hard, right? I believe that even though we weren't where we were at least in a better spot than where we started. A couple of weeks into August, my wife became more and more distant. She spent more and more time with her male friends from work. I began to have concerns, but every time I broached them with her, she would lay my fears to rest. You are the one who struggles with lust, not me. I am never one-on-one. I just make better friends with guys, etc. Despite my misgivings, I figured she was right. After all, I was the one who struggled with porn. I needed more boundaries than she did, right? We had the talk early on in our marriage that we wanted to set the boundary of never being in a one-on-one setting with someone of the opposite sex. We wanted to be above reproach. While she did acknowledge this conversation, she didn't think it was necessary for her. That her struggles weren't with sex, and I should be okay with her hanging out with male co-workers. They are all Christian guys working at a Christian restaurant. What could happen? In mid-August, we celebrate our anniversary. During this time, we decided to go on a large group trip where we would rent an Airbnb in the Northern Peninsula. During this trip, a lot of our closest friends came with, including the guy I would come to learn she was having an affair with. During the trip was when my suspicions really ramped up. She was very distant from me and spent more and more one-on-one time with this guy despite my misgivings. Things really came to a head when I came back one night and realized they were out alone in the lake swimming together. It had gotten to the point where even some of her other friends called her out on her behavior. Fast forward on August 30th, D-Day happened. I had been very suspicious by now, and every night when she came home the questions of whatever you've been, who have you been with, what in the suit? I didn't think she was having an affair, but I told her that I believed she was at risk for having an affair. But no one could spend this much one-on-one time in intimate settings with someone else and not develop feelings. Anyway, on the 30th, we were leaving church, and she was again acting very distant. I decided to ask her straight up, "Are you invested in this marriage?" That's when she replied, "We need to talk." She took me to a park and told me what has been happening. She told me it has been going on since the anniversary. She said she loves this guy and does not plan to stop seeing him. That was just about a month ago. In our few interactions since then, she has made it very clear she does not want back in the marriage, even if this guy wasn't in the picture. She told me that if our marriage wasn't already crumbling, that she wouldn't have gone looking. My brain knows that is bogus, but my heart still thinks it is my fault. In the meantime, she has continued to see this guy, post on Instagram about how much she loves him, and tell her friends about how I should have fought for her more. Something worth noting is that she is a manager at this Christian restaurant, and the guy is a new hire. Apparently, her boss is aware and is chosen to forgive her, aka covered up and go against all their values. I never thought I would get a divorce, but the choice is being made for me. Even if she did want to work on things, I'm not sure I could. I'm living with my parents right now, and this is all just too much sometimes. I still wear the ring, not ready to take it off. I know she doesn't, but still. There are times when I feel excited for the future, but other times when just doing basic tasks is too hard. I can't sleep, too many graphic dreams, and I'm just trying to get by. I do have things to keep me busy, and I do have a new job starting in October, which will be helpful, but that is where I'm at. I've found it difficult to find people who can relate. I am thankful for this community. And here's our first update. Going to see a lawyer on Tuesday says it should be a simple process from a logistical standpoint at least. I've gone back to seeing my therapist once a week. She is a counselor who is Christian, but not a Christian counselor, aka doesn't answer everything with just pray about it, or God works in mysterious ways, or any of that BS. We'll bring that stuff into the session if I ask him to, but not uninvited. The restaurant she works at is Chick-fil-A. She always talked about how their Christian values set them apart from other places. And here's the next update. I don't know what the proper format is for posting updates, so someone feel free to correct me if I'm doing it wrong. I found out that she has been telling people that the reason we are separated is because I was abusive. I talked with my lawyer, and he said the only way that would hurt is if she filed for a PPO. And the only way she could do that is if she had concrete evidence. That means no going to her work, contacting her, etc. Yesterday, I got the ring back, which was really difficult. My lawyer will send her documents to sign, and if she doesn't contest anything, we can move forward with scheduling a hearing, which is about a 2-month waiting period. And another update. 30 days till court hearing. A little bit of context. She had locked herself out of the apartment. We are separated living in different places, but she texted asking for my key to get in. She said she was using the landlord's copy, needed mine. I haven't given it back. One last little foo, I suppose. Or maybe that is the last thing I'm holding on to. Like if I'm surrendering that, I'm surrendering the relationship. She's paranoid by her own admission, terrified I'll break into the house. She told me she was buying a gun. I've never been violent with her, never laid a hand on her, and I've assured her numerous times that I wouldn't resort to violence. That being said, the idea of her being afraid, albeit misplaced fear, feels good. Knowing that she knows I have access to her house if I really wanted to, that I still have a way in. I'm choosing to hold on to that, to nurse that. Maybe I just don't want to let her go all the way. Maybe I still love her. I know that's wrong, but I felt so powerless the entire relationship. So yeah, that's where I'm at. The more I think about it, look into it, the more effed up I realize it is. Today's journal was longer than normal. With the hearing coming up, even though I know she is a narcissist and this is the best move, it's still hard and hitting me. Here we are, friends. Didn't edit it or try to organize my thoughts, but this is where I am at today. 11/17/2020. These are the days when it is the worst. When I'm at work and there is literally nothing to do but research and file. The time I have to think. These are the times when I would normally text my wife. Text her telling her how bored I was. Casual crap. What's up to? How's work? Anything new? Blah blah blah. I miss that. The regular stuff. The day-to-day stuff. I forgot how lonely it is to be single. There, I said it. I'm single. 31 days until the court date, and I'm scared. I am really freaking scared. Talk to Scott about the key. Explain that all behavior has a function. This is the only thing I have control over. It makes sense. I never had control during the marriage. I don't have control during the divorce. Handing over the key is giving it up. 100% giving up. I don't want to go home. I don't want to go to work.
I'm struggling.
Really struggling. Having trouble finding something to look forward to. I don't know if I'll come back from this. Scott told me to reclaim my past. Reclaim my reality. Not wait for someone else to validate my experience. That's really the reason I'm writing the letter. To get acknowledgement from her. For her to give me permission to have my reality. I don't let myself have it if it can't be justified or validated by someone else. I'm on a roller coaster. I'm in a glass box of emotion.
I'm insane.
The silence, as long as something is going on at every moment of the day, then the pain is manageable. I'm not busy. I'm with my thoughts. With my brain. I hate my brain. I feel between a rock and a hard place. I've begun to really dig into the research. Right now, I have over 26 peer-reviewed articles related to narcissism, childhood sexual abuse, and its relation to infidelity. Attachment styles and infidelity, infidelity in the first year of marriage, sexual abuse leading to narcissism, narcissism and infidelity, long-term impact of betrayal trauma, characteristics of cheaters, archetypal hypocrites, characteristics of people most likely to be cheated on, etc. Maybe one day I'll make sense of this. Maybe this will be the biggest freaking research paper I've ever done. Maybe I will be able to conclusively come away from this experience and say, this is why it happened. I'm going to try and perform an autopsy on the corpse that is our marriage. I won't lie, my intention is to definitely point out her fault, to unequivocally convince the jury of my innocence and her role in disintegrating our marriage.
I'm heated.
As I cool down, the hope is that I will be able to better look at my stuff, too, because it's there. As much as I hate to admit it, it is. I think the main reason I feel a need to prove the pain is because she has yet to truly validate it. I have not had a single conversation with her where she did not attempt to explain away, gaslight, justify, twist the truth, displace, or rewrite the narrative. I've been on lawyer mode, on a witness stand. I spent all of last year being cross-examined, and even though we have cut off contact, she is still a leech in my mind. I find myself doubting the institution of marriage, doubting values that I've held just as fundamental truth for so long. I don't see the point in waiting until marriage. I don't see the point in taking the step. I don't see the point in taking the risk. Maybe I do, but the risk and potential for failure is too great. I was certain, freaking certain she was the one. I thought I had dodged a bullet with my last fiancé. Maybe I just traded her on in for a rat poison. One is gross, the other one kills you. Who knows? The one could have been worse, probably would have been, but the point is my judgment is screwed. How can I be certain of anything when the thing I was 1000% sure about is a lie? My mom asked me if I ever saw myself getting married again. Moving on. Right after she asked, she realized it was too soon for the question. Don't get me wrong, it definitely was. I'm not ready to remotely consider moving on, but if I had to answer now, I would say no, I am not getting married again. What am I going to tell everyone? Hey guys, welcome back. This has been hell. This has been the worst. Being in a situation where there is even a risk of this happening again seems unfathomable. It's like having an explosion strapped to my chest. Even if there was only a 10% chance of it going off, there's still a chance. I wasted a freaking ball or wedding on her. It's supposed to be a one-and-done thing.
No.
Right now, I don't think I'm meant for marriage. I was certain. My certainty is shaky. My certainty is unreliable. My certainty is nothing more than I guess. I'm certain of nothing. I'll never be certain of another woman. Marriage doesn't require certainty. It requires faith and trust. Yeah, I freaking know. But I believed in us and trusted her so much that it surmounted to something equivalent of certainty in my mind. I trust too much.
Welcome to my channel. Support our channel by subscribing. Your subscription helps us grow and create more intriguing content like this. Now let's dive into today's story. This is the second part of the story. I learnt about my wife's affair after finding her wet pants. Let's start. After reading Ben's post on Reddit, Liam felt a mixture of emotions: vindication, relief, and a sense of finality. The man he had loathed for weeks was just another victim of Chloe's deceit. Liam didn't feel sympathy for Ben, but there was a certain satisfaction in knowing that Chloe hadn't just wronged him. She had manipulated them both. It made Liam realize just how far removed from the woman he had fallen in love with Chloe had become. The next few days passed slowly. Although the revelation helped Liam make sense of the situation, healing wasn't as simple as reading a post on the internet. The pain of betrayal lingered, not just in his heart but in the quiet moments of his day. There were times when he would wake up in the morning and, for a split second, forget what had happened. The memories of the life they had built together would rush back. The lazy Sunday mornings, the spontaneous trips, the nights spent talking about their dreams. But reality would always settle in shortly after, and the sharp sting of betrayal would make itself known once again. Liam spent the first few months after the divorce trying to fill the void. He kept himself busy, working long hours, taking up new hobbies, and reconnecting with old friends he had lost touch with. But there was still an empty space in his life where Chloe used to be, and no matter how many distractions he found, that space seemed to remain untouched. One day, after several months had passed, Liam decided it was time to start letting go of the past. He had been holding on to small reminders of Chloe, old photos, gifts, little trinkets that had once meant so much. They were all stored in a box in the back of his closet, gathering dust. It was time to get rid of them. He opened the box and was immediately hit with a flood of memories. There were framed pictures of them smiling together on vacations, notes they had written to each other on anniversaries, and tickets to shows they had attended. Every item in that box represented a moment in their relationship, a moment that once felt meaningful and significant. But now, they were nothing more than relics of a life that no longer existed. Liam sifted through the items one by one, slowly placing them in a pile to throw away. Each photo, each letter, was a small step toward closure. As he held one of the last photos in his hand, a picture of them at a friend's wedding, beaming with happiness, He felt an unexpected calm wash over him. The anger, the bitterness, the betrayal. It no longer held the same power over him. These were just memories. They weren't who he was anymore. By the time he was done, the box was empty, and Liam felt lighter than he had in months. He threw the items away and closed the door on that chapter of his life. From that day forward, Liam resolved to live in the present and focus on his future, a future that no longer involved Chloe or the pain she had caused him. Time passed, and Liam gradually found peace. The anger and sadness that had once consumed him started to fade, replaced by a sense of determination to rebuild his life. He threw himself into his work, and before long his efforts were rewarded with the promotion he had worked so hard for. He moved out of the house he had once shared with Chloe, opting for a sleek, modern apartment closer to the city. It was smaller, more minimalist, but it was his, a space where he could start fresh. In his new apartment, Liam felt a renewed sense of freedom. He began to rediscover parts of himself that had been buried beneath the weight of his failing marriage. He took up hobbies he had once loved but abandoned over the years: photography, hiking, and even cooking. He found joy in the simple things, like exploring new neighborhoods in the city or spending weekends in nature, away from the hustle and bustle of his work life. It wasn't always easy, but Liam slowly began to realize that he didn't need Chloe or anyone else to make him happy. He was enough on his own. One evening, while out with some friends at a local bar, Liam ran into an old college acquaintance, Sarah. She had been part of his friend group back in the day, though they had never been particularly close. But that night, something felt different. They started talking, catching up on the years they had missed, exchanging stories about where life had taken them. Sarah had recently moved back to the city after spending a few years abroad, and like Liam, she was also starting over in her own way. As the night went on, their conversation deepened. There was something easy about talking to Sarah, something that felt natural, comfortable. They shared similar experiences, similar disappointments in life, but also a similar hope for the future. By the end of the night, Liam realized he hadn't thought about Chloe once. Sarah made him laugh in a way he hadn't laughed in a long time. She made him feel alive again. Liam and Sarah began spending more time together. What started as casual meetups with mutual friends turned into long dinners, late-night conversations, and eventually, something more. Sarah wasn't like Chloe. She didn't play games or hide behind a facade. She was genuine, kind, and open. Being with her felt different, in the best possible way. There was no pressure, no expectation. It was just two people enjoying each other's company and seeing where things might go. For the first time in a long time, Liam allowed himself to feel hopeful about love again. He had been so guarded after what had happened with Chloe, so afraid of opening his heart and getting hurt again. But with Sarah, things felt different. She wasn't just a distraction or a rebound. She was someone who understood him, someone who made him feel like he could move on without fear. As the weeks turned into months, Liam and Sarah's relationship blossomed. They took things slowly, allowing their bond to grow naturally. There was no rushing, no need to define their relationship immediately. They were both healing from past wounds and learning how to trust again. But with every date, every conversation, Liam could feel himself letting go of the baggage he had been carrying. One evening, as they sat together on the balcony of Liam's apartment, looking out at the city skyline, Sarah asked him something that took him by surprise. "Do you ever think about her?" she asked, her voice soft but curious. Liam knew exactly who she meant. Chloe. He leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. "I used to," he admitted. "A lot. It was hard not to. But now, not so much. I think I've finally made peace with it." Sarah nodded, her eyes searching his face for any lingering pain. "You seem different, happier." Liam smiled at her, reaching out to take her hand. "I am," he said simply. For the first time, Liam realized that he had truly moved on. The anger, the hurt, it no longer consumed him. Chloe was a part of his past, but she didn't define his future. He had learned from the experience, grown from it, and in the process, found someone who made him realize that love could be pure and real again. Months later, Liam had all but put Chloe out of his mind. His life with Sarah was progressing steadily. They weren't in a rush, but there was a quiet certainty between them. Liam had found a happiness he hadn't known was possible after his world had fallen apart. Then one day, fate intervened in a way Liam hadn't anticipated. He was at a cafe downtown, meeting a colleague for coffee. As he waited at the counter, he saw a familiar figure walk through the door. Chloe. It had been nearly a year since the divorce, and seeing her felt like a distant memory come to life. Chloe looked different, tired, a little worn down. Gone was the bright, confident woman who had once been the center of his universe. She hadn't noticed him yet, but Liam could see the weight of what had happened etched on her face. She looked around, scanning the cafe, and when her eyes finally landed on Liam, they widened in surprise. For a moment, they just stared at each other. There was no anger, no bitterness, just a strange, hollow recognition. Chloe walked over to him, her steps hesitant. "Liam," she said quietly. "Hi." "Hi, Chloe," Liam replied, his voice calm. They stood there for a moment, the silence heavy between them. Chloe fidgeted with the strap of her purse, clearly unsure of what to say. How have you been?" she finally asked, her voice tentative. Liam thought about the question for a moment. He could have said so many things. He could have told her how she had broken his heart, how much pain she had caused him, how he had struggled to move on. But instead he smiled, a genuine, peaceful smile. "I've been good," he said simply. Chloe nodded, looking down at the floor. That's good. I'm glad." There was another long pause. Liam could see the regret in her eyes, the sadness that hung over her like a cloud. But he didn't feel sorry for her. He didn't feel angry either. He just felt nothing. Chloe had been a part of his life once, but that chapter was closed now. "Well, take care, Chloe," Liam said, nodding toward the door. Chloe gave him a small, sad smile. "You too, Liam." And with that, she turned and walked out of the cafe, disappearing into the crowd. Liam watched her go, feeling a strange sense of relief. It was over. Truly over. Seeing Chloe again had been the final piece of closure he hadn't realized he needed. She had made her choices, and he had made his. And now, standing there in that cafe, Liam knew with certainty that he had moved on. As Liam left the cafe that day, he didn't look back. His past with Chloe was behind him, and his future with Sarah, whatever it might hold, was something he could look forward to with hope and excitement. He had learned from the pain, grown from the heartbreak, and come out stronger on the other side. The lesson was simple. Life moves on, and so do we. Even after the deepest betrayals, there is always a chance for new beginnings, for new happiness, and for new love. Liam had found that for himself, and in doing so, he had learned to trust again, not just in others, but in himself. And that, in the end, was the greatest victory of all. Previous part I will share in the next video. Thanks for watching and subscribe my channel. I need your support. Thanks.
My aunt is incredibly beautiful. She's tall and slender, and she has a really great personality too. My aunt and I are as close as lovers. I was born in the countryside. My parents ran a poultry farm. During middle school, I lived in a boarding house near my school. Every Saturday, I would take the bus home to enjoy the warm meals my mom made. High school was no different. Living on my own near school, my meals were often inadequate, which is probably why I didn't grow very tall. Farming and managing the poultry farm. My parents didn't have much capacity to look after us. As the eldest son, I was able to attend university. Thanks to the hard work and money my parents saved, it added more burden to my parents. When I got accepted into a university in Seoul, not in my hometown, my uncle, who is 10 years younger than my father, worked in a company in Seoul. His house was a 30-minute drive from my university. But I chose to live close to my school, having lived independently since my teenage years. I was quite adept at household chores and washing dishes. My aunt was a real beauty who did some modeling in her 20s. Despite being a mother, she maintains a slim figure without any signs of fat. She jokes about remaining a minimalist eater for life to avoid gaining weight, and her discipline in food intake is truly impressive. My aunt is raising 2 children who are close in age and attends kindergarten, while also working part-time. I would visit my cousins in the evenings or on weekends. My aunt has always been kind to me. Sometimes, while I played with the kids, she would run errands at the market. She told me just to be there for the kids to ensure they're safe, and they really took to me well. I started to feel affectionate towards my cousins too. My aunt welcomed my visits, probably as a break from caring for the kids. There were 2 fish tanks in my aunt's house. They got the guppies because they breed prolifically, which was educational for the children. One day, with my uncle busy, my cousins, my aunt, and I went to buy another fish tank. The store was attached to a flower shop, offering a lot to see. My aunt has a keen interest in beautiful flowers. I bought her the flowers she was eyeing and the guppies as a gift. My aunt said, "It's so nice to come out like this without your uncle. Let me treat you to some pork cutlets." And we went to a famous pork cutlet restaurant. Even waiting in line, she said, "The most rewarding thing is doing something the kids enjoy. I guess I'm really a mom now," with a beautiful smile that made my heart flutter. After enjoying pork cutlets, spaghetti, and coffee with my aunt and the kids, we went to her house. We set up the fish tank and added the baby guppies, and the kids were eager to feed them. Auntie said, "Thank you for taking time out of your weekend to help, and I'll take good care of this plant," with a bright smile. That seemed to wash away all of the day's fatigue. Uncle was often busy with work and frequently had to travel out of town. Not long after, I told Auntie, "If there's anything I can do to help, just let me know. I'm a bit more free now that midterms are over." I received a call from her, her voice filled with urgency. "The eldest got hurt playing at kindergarten. I need to take them to the hospital. Can you come over and watch the youngest? It would be too hard to take them both," she explained. Apparently, while lining up to get into the car at kindergarten pickup time, a classmate playfully pushed my cousin, who then hit their forehead on a piece of wood in the flower bed, causing a gush of blood. After managing to stop the bleeding, I rushed to Auntie's house. The younger sibling was crying, worried about the blood and the injury, and I reassured them. It'll be okay once we get to the hospital. I found some frozen fried rice in the fridge for dinner, turned on their favorite cartoon channel, played with the youngest, and helped them wash up. Late at night, Auntie came home with the sibling. They had to get 5 stitches on their forehead, and it had been quite the ordeal. They threw up after taking a sedative, so they had to take another, and they waited until the sedative fully wore off and the child was comfortably seated before coming home. Without her husband around, it was challenging to calm a crying and fussy child, but she said it was a huge relief that I could take care of the youngest, and she gave me some allowance money. Auntie, it's okay. I've been hurt worse when I was younger. I broke my arm jumping over a fence and had to eat with my left hand for 2 weeks, I said with a laugh. Uncle got hurt a lot too, huh? Boys really are different, she sighed, seeing my cousin fall asleep and leaving the house. I felt sad for the hardships Auntie went through, but proud that I could help. Uncle came back from his trip and took me out for dinner, giving me a generous allowance. Both sets of grandparents live far away, so having you look after the youngest was a huge help. Thank you so much, he said. I felt good receiving the allowance from Uncle and said, "Don't hesitate to call me if you need anything." Auntie, noting how well the siblings listened to me, suggested a day trip to the amusement park. I hadn't been to an amusement park since middle school, so I was excited to go along. Auntie prepared a picnic, and we spent the entire day riding attractions at the park. Seeing Auntie's excitement, even more than the kids, showed me another charming side of her. Auntie's homemade lunchbox was delicious on the way there, and when I arrived, the kids were already fast asleep. She grabbed my hand and said, "I don't know how I'd manage without James. You're always so busy with your friends, yet you still find time to look after your cousins. Thank you." Then Uncle got a call from a friend. An old college buddy's father had passed away, and he was asking if Uncle could join him. Uncle left immediately, and Auntie and I ended up drinking in the living room. With the kids being so young, he's just too busy. Auntie sighed, saying Uncle was always so occupied with work, attending to social obligations, and traveling that he was more like a lodger in his own home. She confessed, "It's embarrassing to say, but it feels like we're just roommates now. We haven't shared a bed in a long time." After hearing this, I went to my room, but could still hear Auntie's cheerful voice. This was a first for me. I had dated someone in high school, but we broke up before college, and I hadn't been close to anyone since. Auntie exclaimed, "Oh, it's your first time. What an honor. I've been relying on you, James, lately. Do you have a girlfriend, James? You always come home early. A handsome and caring guy like you must be popular at school." "No, there's no one at school. Just someone I have a crush on." "Really? A crush? That's so romantic. Tell me, who is it?" I replied. "It's you, Auntie." She was shocked. "Me? Really? Since when?" "Lately, we've been running into each other a lot. Watching you with the kids, you seemed tired. But you were always so kind to me. I've wanted to confess for a while, but was hesitant." Auntie shared her struggles. "This house guest has made things really tough for me. Falling asleep in the living room without turning off the TV, never coming to the bedroom. I got married to be happy, but reality is so different." That day marked the start of our carefree relationship. A few days later, Auntie called, "Want to come over for a drink? The kids are away on a kindergarten camping trip, and your uncle is on another business trip. I chuckled at the excitement in her voice and brought her favorite strawberry cake to Auntie's house. The outfit she had prepared for the occasion was truly enchanting. Our cute and sexy auntie. We tossed and turned all night, dozing off and waking up intermittently. I never imagined something like this could happen with beautiful auntie. I don't think I can stop these secret meetings.